So I started volunteering at the CAV after I'd been at a conference in Lorne, and there I met people like Leela. She was, I think she was either organising it or she was on the committee. And somehow or other, which I don't quite remember, I got asked if I'd join the committee. And that stage, Margaret had just left, Dave was still on, and Leela was executive officer at that stage. Yeah, Jeff Tellison was treasurer because they just dealt with the fact that they'd had money in Pyramid.
Yes.
Which we got back because we were depositors, not shareholders. The following year, after I was on the committee, Leela said, would I stand for vice president? And I'm always keen to be the second in charge, not the first.
But you finally got there.
Yeah, well, that was the fun thing. I was just at Box Forest and this letter came to the school and I opened it up and it said, from the president, I'm resigning, you're it. And I sort of felt a bit ill at that stage, totally unexpected, didn't have a clue what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I'd never held a position like that of what was then a reasonably large organisation. Luckily, Leela was EO, so she helped me through, and she'd been on the committee a bit longer than me.
You were president for 9 years, though. 9
Yeah,
years.
yep. An interesting time. We lived through the delights of Jeff Kennett and the issues that arose there when the position of careers advisor in schools became optional for schools to have one. It was prior to that, they'd been quarantined government schools, they were quarantined, and so they were extra staff that were given to every school, so their positions were secure. But that was taken away and therefore it became optional, and that became a real challenge as to how we would deal with that. Because so many people became vulnerable as a result, as schools were starting a whole lot of jobs were taken away from that sort of protected position. And that's when we took up vocational education as one of our roles of looking after those courses in schools. That was a strategy that we sort of moved to as a way of kind of keeping the positions alive.
So a lot of practitioners lost their time allowance in the 90s. That's when the reduction actually started happening, wasn't it, Naomi? Because there was a substantive position in the 1980s. So in some ways, we've been playing catch-up for 3 decades from where we were in the 1980s,
And that's where we got, we did things like develop a partnership with the Dusseldorf Foundation. Richard Sweet did the big paper that, and that relationship established. We did and the other thing that we did was we instituted the new careers training, because again that got lost as well. Prior to that, there was a week-long new careers teachers conference that was subsidised by the department. Mine was one of the last ones I did that was done, and that was at Dookie. I've never eaten so much meat in all my life because of course it's a farming school, and Leela was my mentor for that. So,
well, it was the 80s were actually, that position was one where it was considered important to be qualified. So practitioners would do their 1 week of training, followed by usually a top-up later in the year, and then they were offered training through Deakin University in the diploma, the graduate diploma of careers and career education. So Leela was one of the first graduates of that program, I think.
I did mine through RMIT.
RMIT.
I decided that after a couple of years of being careers advisor that I really needed to know what I was doing.
Qualification,
rather than sending children down paths that may not be that appropriate. But it was good to also get reinforced that what I'd been doing was not correct, but had validity with it.
It changed in the 90s.
Yeah. I think I was also one of the last to go through where I didn't have to pay fees. It was still free.
It was like on a scholarship. Yes.
But yeah, it was so when that subsidising of the department came through or disappeared, Lyra and I looked at each other and said, well, we can't just leave people with nowhere to go. We cobbled together a course that the poor people had to do over 2 weekends down at Richmond. So, and we ran that for a few years before we sort of then decided, played around with it, and you and I played around with it
in the 2000s.
Yeah.
But that training program continued right through the 1990s, and there was significant churn, wasn't there, of career practitioners in schools. It was really quite sad because the position was advertised at the end of every year, and anybody who wanted it put their hand up, whether they were qualified or not. And we were training, the CEAV was training anywhere up to 130 new career advisors every year. It wasn't the same people, so we'd train one lot, and then the next year there'd be another 130. So it wasn't the best situation. The 1990s did a lot of damage to careers education in schools. Yeah.
And that was the impetus to move towards us delivering qualifications, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, right, in the 2000s. And I mean, Naomi, you were there when the associations nationally started to see that there was an issue.
Yep.
Do you remember what year that the very first Seeker meeting started? Because we were there right at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, really it came out of Richard Street's paper, because that was the year that we, when Richard published his paper, we managed to get a vocational education grant that we then tied in, and that was the second paper, and I keep forgetting the names of them, A Job Well Done. And we brought together people from across Australia. That was the first time, from WA, David Carney,
New South Wales,
Wales,
Mike G's, all of them,
people like that. And we looked at Richard's research, and out of that became a suggestion that we actually develop a national body that would work together. And that was really established under, I think Brendan Nelson might have been the federal education, because I know we went to the conference in Tasmania, in Hobart, with and so out of that there was and I've forgotten her name, that was in the department, in the federal department, came down and gave some seed money for that to occur.
To start happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we saw in the 1990s, Naomi, a push towards vetting schools. Yeah. And that agenda really kicked off around 1994. And what it did was effectively position careers in the school to the side, and the vet agenda took over. The career practitioner was the only one that had labour market knowledge. And so what the principals were doing was appointing the career practitioner to be the vet coordinator, because they actually had labour market knowledge. Wrong move, because vet in schools is curriculum, it's not career development. But unfortunately, right through the 90s, right up until Seeker actually got this grant to form itself, we see that career advisors were wearing multiple hats. They did everything. And that's where you see the explosion of the role, lack of resources in schools. The 90s were not great for career education in schools, but it meant that the CEAV had to step up, so CEAV became integral to the life of the practitioner at that point. That's really when we start to see the members surging to find somewhere to go, to get training, to get professional development, to stay current, to get support. And that was our role, really, wasn't it?